welcome to the My Peeps Show podcast. I am Anthony, and today I have a very super awesome special guest. I've already set you up really high there, Rik. So
I'm looking around to see who you have on.
No, I have the very funny, the very talented Rik Roberts. You've probably seen or heard him on CMT or GAC or NPR. That's a lot of, abbreviations there. But this guy is heard and seen all over the place. You've probably heard him on Sirius XM's Laugh USA or Blue Collar Radio. Rik, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, I'm excited for it.
Oh, trust me, it'll be much worse. In about 5 minutes, you'll realize that what have I done. So this is.
We'll mysteriously have a bad connection then.
That's what all those other podcasts were. That's now I know what they were doing to me. But no, I know you're a really busy person. I mean, you are a very busy person. By the way, I just want to go ahead and start off and say I love your School of Laughs podcast.
Thank you.
They are so great and so informative, and I'm going to plug it a couple of times during this podcast because I can't plug it enough. I don't believe whether you're wanting to learn how to speak better or just be a comedian, I can't plug it enough. So, how long have you been doing the School of Laughs thing now, Rik?
You know, when I moved to Nashville about 17 years ago, the comedy club asked me to teach a class, and like most people, I thought you couldn't teach people how to be funny. I can definitely teach people how to be funnier and less boring and more to the point, and that's what comedy really is. So about 17 years total.
Wow, that is, and I don't even know how you fit it in with your schedule because I've kind of seen your schedule on your website, and I don't know how on earth you have the time to do it.
You know, initially it was a way to save time. Like when I moved here, had just gotten married, and I wanted to spend less time out of town. So I thought, you know, what if I taught some other people what I learned in comedy so they can get on the road and go take over the gigs that I'm trying to kind of fade out of. And that way I know at least, 4 times a month I'd be home on Monday nights to be with my wife and my family and stuff. So that was the originator of it. And it's harder now because even when I'm doing those classes, I still want to be at home with my kids and everything because I'm on the road a lot now. So, but yeah, it's been a journey trying to fit it all together. But I think if you're challenging yourself every day and learning something new, then you're helping everybody around you at the same time.
Yeah, and there's probably no telling how many people you have helped in 17 years. But before we continue on talking about the School of Laughs and everything, did a little bit of research, just trying to learn about you, Rik, and see that you were born in Kentucky and got your degree in communications, which is really awesome. But so I have to ask though, were you a class clown? Like, is that where it started for you?
A little bit, for a long time I was really, really shy, and so what I was the brains behind the operation. I would suggest ideas of how other guys could get in trouble, then they would take the lead and go do it. And I would leave about 30 seconds before the police got there, and that kept me out of trouble.
That's great. Did you know you always, like as a kid, I know for me, like the first thing I wanted to be was, I remember thinking, yeah, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was just the most coolest thing in the world to be in my eyes. Did you always know you wanted to be a comedian, or was it later on in life?
I never even thought of comedy as something you could go do. That was the one thing that surprised me about doing it for so long now. When I first, going through high school, I didn't even plan on going to college. My goal was to work at a gas station and be the first gas station that also sold pizza. And I tell you, a lot of guys took that idea and ran with it. And I missed
That is so true. Darn
yeah.
them.
I'm like, people went in here to get gas. Now they have to go across the street to eat. Why don't you just put the food where the gas station is? I mean, make it a quicker truck stop experience for everyday people, which is now what every mini mart is. But that was my goal. And then I got recruited to play soccer at some schools. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go to college. and if I'm going to do that, I was always into the news. Like I wanted to be the next Tom Brokaw. And then by the time I got to college, I started watching some Saturday Night Live a little closer. I'm like, no, I want to be Dennis Miller on Weekend Update.
Wow.
So that was like the first in the back of my head thought of, I'd like to do some comedy at some point. But that was just like floating around. It wasn't even concrete or something I even knew how to approach doing. And then when I got out of college with my radio and TV degree and my mullet, TV didn't want a guy with mullets on the set.
Right.
Radio was laying off. I think NPR laid off something like 1,500 reporters the year that I went into radio reporting. So then I stumbled in literally onto an open mic thinking it was a place to play guitar. Turned out to be a place to do comedy, and after failing horribly for a while, I decided to make a run at it.
Wow, that's really cool. I also noticed that I believe it was '92. You joined, or you started doing improv, like a comedy troupe or something.
Yeah, that was kind of the way I got into it initially. I went to a place to perform, which I thought was for guitar players, turned out to be for comedians. That was my first night. Learned my lesson that way. And then met a bunch of people that did comedy in Columbus, Ohio, where I lived at the time. And eventually they said, you ought to take your 3 minutes of material and go to the comedy club and do their open mic. And after the open mic portion, the improv group in town would close out with about an hour of improv. And I had never seen anything like that. I mean, this troupe was phenomenal. And they were thinking on their feet. I remember the first show I went to see, they asked for a song suggestion, like make up a title of a song. And I yelled it out. And they made a song out of it, a reggae song on the spot. I'm like, what just happened? So I would go to that club every week, even if I wasn't doing the open mic, just to watch that group. Then they had an audition. I'm like, well, I'll audition for it just to learn, about it. And they needed a guitar player. Oddly enough, their guitar player was moving to Nashville at the time to give a run at songwriting. So they needed somebody that could play the guitar. And if I learned how to do sketches on the side, that was a bonus.
No
So
kidding.
yeah, I got in with that group in '91, and then in '92 they said, you want to go on the main group and go on gigs with us out of town. So that's when I quit my other job.
Wow, man, that's very interesting. I know for me, like I remember, believe it or not, as a kid, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I was really influenced by Saturday Night Live, In Living Color, and I know as a kid also, like I thought Sinbad was just like the funniest. One thing that attracted me to his humor was his clean comedy.
Uh-huh.
I just don't get me wrong, I love all kinds of comedy, but I just thought it was so cool that where most of my friends were talking about all these other guys that were, like Def Comedy Jam or whatever, which was really funny stuff to me. I loved how Sinbad could go out there and make people laugh and not have that. And that's probably around the time I started going to church and stuff. So it was kind of like a really heavily influenced, like, wow, this is pretty cool to see these guys, see other comedians as well do clean comedy. And I thought this is what I wanted to do. And I think also you were talking about improv. I loved. Did you ever watch Whose Line Is It Anyway? Like in the early '90s, I guess, when they had the English host and stuff.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, I thought so too. Did you have any favorites of the troupe there that they had?
No, I always like the musical guys just because as a guy who somewhat plays guitar and sort of sings, I was always impressed with guys that could do that, which is enough by itself, and then also try to time it out to where the punchlines hit on the 4/4 beat or the 2/3 or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
so those guys are always my favorites. Even with the U.S. version, Wayne Brady, I always thought just how much talent that guy has to pull all that together.
Yeah, and don't sell yourself short on the guitar. You do a great job, man. I've heard a lot of your stuff, and I think you do a great job. I've even now I seen you live. Let's see, it was a couple months ago when it was for Nate Bargatze and Keith
Yeah,
Halberstadt.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, and but anyways, like I've seen some of your stuff online. I think you do a great job singing. When did you go? Hey, I want to learn how to play guitar. Was that at a younger age as well?
Yeah, I think I picked it up somewhere middle of high school, and I had a four-string Sears plastic acoustic looking guitar, and I didn't even know where to buy strings for it, and
Yeah.
I remember just tuning those. I took the four strings and put them all down at the end, so I really had like a high E as my fourth, and I had loosened it up so low it was rattling. But I would sit there and listen to the radio, and I would just try to get one of the strings in tune and just play just the notes, the typical smoke on the water type stuff that everybody learns when they first start.
Yeah.
And I remember even in college, I started playing some songs, writing some songs. And I remember making a little demo tape during one of our winter breaks and giving it to some of my friends. And I said, let me know what you think. And this one guy wrote down, like he couldn't even face me after he listened to it. He just took a set in an envelope and on the outside he said, not horrible. Be even better if you could sing and play at the same time. Because I would like play two notes and then I would sing something like an old blues guy, like da 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 da,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my first thing, like, oh, now I've got to sing at the same time I'm playing. That's the next level there, But
Wha-
when I got into comedy, I did go to a place literally to play guitar the first night. I thought it was an open stage like we had in college, like poetry reading and a guy playing guitar. And so I played guitar my first time on stage, a Bridge Over Troubled Water, and I think it was Born to Be Wild, like, and not very well, but nobody clapped at the end. And then they said, you need to be funny. I'm like, oh. So that's literally, I didn't know until after I got through my first set that it was a comedy night.
Oh,
And but all the comedians told me to ditch the guitar because I learned now because they couldn't play guitars why they wanted me to ditch it. But they're like, you need to learn how to tell jokes, which was really good for me to listen to that because you do need to learn how to tell jokes because there are times where your guitar doesn't work or you break a string and all this other stuff. So I kind of put the guitar away until that improv group needed me for that, and then I brought it back around.
wow, that's really interesting because I heard one of your podcasts. Also, I thought it was a really great point that you mentioned that you need to have something else besides just telling jokes, like playing guitar or juggling or whatever it is. I think it was in the Martin Short, Steve Martin podcast you were talking about. I thought that was such a great point just to have that as that backup as well.
Yeah, it's good to have. I've since I've watched Steve Martin and Martin Short that live performance, I just call it a plus one. Like every comedian, the least you should do is be funny. We expect that, but what are you going to surprise us with? So some comics are great joke writers, but can tell a killer story, and that's their plus one. They
Yeah.
might be a person that juggles, like you say, does magic, does impressions, maybe plays the guitar. There were comics when I first started. There was a guy that was really funny in Cincinnati that played trumpet in his act because he knew how to do it. So that was like one thing he could do that set him apart. Like, and he was funny. He was on all the Evening at the Improvs and all that kind of stuff. So as a creative person, I think you should pour at least 80% of your effort into your main thing, but you do get burned out sometimes. So having that secondary thing just to take the pressure off and make it, and that's usually like the fun thing because you're not stressed out about making it your business, but it can evolve into part of your stuff, part of
Yeah.
your.
Wow, great tips, man. You'd mentioned Steve Martin as well. I know you've read his book, obviously, surely Born Standing Up.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, man, and I thought it was so amazing that, and I'm pretty sure he had said that he learned how to play banjo from just listening to records, just playing them back and forth, right?
Yeah, that's the way a lot of musicians do. Just kind of you hear it, you think you can copy it, and once you learn how to mimic, I never took a guitar lesson in my life, but I learned enough of the structure of it to where I could get through it. I would still like to go and take a theory class and learn how to string together some chords that make sense, but that to me it might take the funny out of it, but it could make it a lot better at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I have another question for you. Which do you prefer looking back now, doing the comedy troupe thing, or is it the stand up by yourself? And is how big of a difference is it?
The comedy group is tricky. It's my favorite thing by far, like 10 times more favorite than stand up.
Oh wow.
But you have the dynamics of with our group, we had 7 in the group, 5 would travel, 2 would stay back and teach classes and hold down the gigs we had in our hometown. We had like 4 or 5 nights in Columbus, Ohio when we were off the road. So the secondary troop would take care of that. But so you have the group dynamics of you got 5 guys in a van. Uh, Usually one of the guys had some kind of mood going on where, he was angry at the world or whatever.
Yeah.
We had to split hotel rooms sometimes 3 in one room, 2 in the other, which wasn't horrible, but we had a guy that had a gas problem, so it was a little tricky. Sometimes those windows don't open on the 7th floor, and there's probably a reason why because you jump out. But there's all those group dynamics, and then of course in any group, some people want to steal the show, which as a troupe that's okay, but everybody should have their fair share of opportunities to do that. So sometimes the crowd misses out because somebody's trying to get make themselves the star of the show. It's tricky. We were actually pretty good at balancing that, but you have all that going on, which takes some of the fun out of it. Stand up, you're the only thing on stage, so you have all the glory if you want to look at it that way, and all the pressure at the same time. And if something's going wrong, you just go back and you fix it. With an improv group, sometimes it's hard to get the other people to fix the things that are bothering you, and for them to get you to fix the stuff that's bothering them. So, but if I could do it and all things were equal, and I came home, did the same amount of gigs, came home with the same pay, I would do improv for sure.
Oh wow. Okay, great, awesome. So I think one thing that I love about your comedy as well is, I guess you could use the quote unquote clean comedian thing. That's would be a good way to say it. And I love that you do that. How hard is it to be a clean comedian?
It's not hard, but what it takes is patience.
Hmm.
Every comic that's starting tomorrow, they've got the option to to go either way. Actually, I think when you first start, just write every single joke down you think of, because even the ones that are maybe blue or dirty or aren't going to be in your set, you're at least learning some structure when you write those jokes, and you're learning some timing. And there's a time and place for everything, but to focus on just being clean, you've got to make sure you have really strong technique. It's almost like I look at clean comedians almost like the Golden State Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Their technique and their basic skills are so good, they can overcome a lot of different things. I mean, Seth Curry isn't the tallest guy, isn't the heaviest guy, isn't the most muscular guy, but he can put up 40 points on you because his technique is so strong. So when you're a clean comic, you've got to be really solid in those fundamentals, and then you apply your spin to things and whatever your brain is capable of putting out that's funny, and you're going to be able to survive. But if you're just going to try to be clean and cute and funny on stage without that, you're probably going to die a horrible death in the comedy club scene, because the dirtier comics are going to have their dirtiness plus technique and skill on top of it, and it's going to be hard to shine in that environment.
Wow, that's great stuff. I know for me, I did, believe it or not, I think it was around 99 or 2000. I'm not exactly for sure the year. I did a couple amateur nights at Zany's like years and years ago. And I really wanted to do, clean comedy, which was really scary. I know my first experience, Rik, I'll tell you, I had, there wasn't YouTube back then. So, I had no idea how the whole amateur night thing went. And so my first experience was I had like a page and a half to 2 pages of stuff. I thought, well, I'll do at least a page of this stuff. And I showed up at Zany's, and they took us, all the amateurs, upstairs, and they were like, okay, you've got like, I think it's 2 to 4 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. And I thought, oh crap, like I thought I'd get like 10 minutes, which was so arrogant to even remotely think that. And I was like, what on earth am I going to talk about? I have no idea. And so I think I was like the 6th or 7th person that was going to go up, and they said, okay, when the person goes up, the person before you goes up, get close to the stage so you can just kind of go right up. And I remember I had it in my mind, okay, I'm going to say this. And I was actually enjoying the comedian before me. I was like, oh, wow, he's pretty good. That's awesome. Good for him and stuff. And so you'd had to write your own intro as well, which was so pitiful. It was such a horrible intro, because I didn't know I'd have to do that either, Rik. Yep. And so anyways, the MC introduces me, and as soon as I grabbed the mic, I forgot everything. So I'm kind of taking the mic out of the stand. I'm like, what on earth was I supposed to say? And I set the stand down, and I went a completely different direction. But it went really cool, man. I was so excited for it. And so then when I got to my second amateur night, which was like I think it was 2 months later, it was a different crowd. I knew it was a younger crowd, and I just thought, even though I was younger, I felt like my humor was for a little older crowd. And man, you talk about like to go on such a high after the first amateur night, and everybody's like, oh, hey, good job, you did awesome, and yada yada. And then the second one, you just feel like the different vibe. That was so scary to me. Was your first experiences doing stand-up on your amateur nights, were they scary, or did you have that confidence like, man, this is what I'm meant to do?
It's almost hard to remember, because it's been like 26 or 7 years or whatever. It's been a long time, but I do remember. I think I was pretty fearless in the sense that I don't think I got nervous, because I didn't know yet what a good set was like. Like, you had a good first experience. I didn't have a good set till probably 9 or 10 months in of doing it 5 or 6 times a week. Like, in my mind, I thought I did. If I got 1 laugh a minute or whatever, or one joke worked, I thought, man, that was successful.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I kind of got enough meat on the bone to where I knew what it tasted like to have a good set, that after that, if I didn't get that same thing again, then I would get disappointed. Then I would get kind of nervous about going back up. But I honestly was kind of too dumb to know any better when I first started. I just kept going back. I knew it was going to take a long time to get going, and that's kind of the reason I love teaching the classes now, is because you can't shortcut everything, but I can tell you what a technique is and teach you that, and you can apply that to your material before you even step on stage, and then you have more confidence when you do. Back then, I really, even 6 or 7 years in, I didn't know why people laughed at certain jokes, and I would just do them again if they did, and if they didn't, I would blame the audience for not getting it.
Right.
Just like every comic does. And it wasn't till the club here asked me to teach a class that I started looking at my own show. And at that point, I was already I had an hour of material by then. I was 10 years in when I moved to Nashville, and I was getting some headlining gigs, mostly the middle spot where you do 30 minutes, and it was still, you know, more hits than miss. Probably 80% of the time I was having a good show, and 20% of the time something didn't work. But after I looked at my act and started writing the course stuff to teach, I really identified 14 or 15 techniques that I used that when I used them, I would get a laugh. And if I had a joke that didn't have a technique, it was 50-50 at best, you
Oh,
know?
wow.
So, so just knowing that much, if I'd had that knowledge way back in the day, that first year could have gone so much smoother, and I would have known why people laughed and why they didn't. And that's a big part of it now, I think.
Yeah, wow, that's great stuff. I thought it was really on one of your podcasts I was listening to. I had never thought of this before, but you had mentioned how like if somebody starts a new job, you don't really start feeling comfortable till 4 to 6 weeks in.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
can you explain that? Because I thought that was such a great analogy, and using that for people starting out as a comedian.
Yeah, so this could either inspire people or keep them from ever trying comedy or anything. But yeah, whenever I worked a new job, and I think most people would feel similar, you might, after 2 or 3 weeks, feel comfortable going to the building. You know how to get there, you know what your job duties are, you know what you can accomplish in a day. And maybe by the fourth week, you feel, okay, I fit in here. I kind of got the hang of it. And the people working around you might feel, okay, they've got the hang of it. So that's 4 40 hours a week, which is 160 hours. Okay, in stand up, you get 2 minutes at a time or 5 minutes at a time when you first start. So even to get your first week at work in stand up where you can accumulate 40 hours, it can take you a year and a half to 2 years, depending on where you're at and the opportunities you have. So now that's just to kind of feel if you should be there. And so most people, if they quit, I would imagine quit within the first 4 or 5 times up.
Yeah.
But it takes literally, I tell my students, I tell people that listen to the podcast, if you want to do this, go up at least 100 times. And if you live in a city like Nashville, you can do that, 3 or 4 times a week. You can get on stage, so you can do that easily within a year, even a half of a year, if you're dedicated to trying it out. If you live further out, it might be a little bit longer because you can only get to a place that has a club maybe once or twice a week.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't even consider whether I should continue or quit until after 100 times up. And if you don't make it to 100, you found your answer already.
Wow, that's a great point. So I have a question for you then. Do you think, does it take, can a comedian already have his voice when he starts, or does it take like that 100 shows before you start to understand what your voice is? Because I think that was my problem to a certain extent, because I had done a few more and I was trying different things, anything from Steve Martinish kind of stuff to just storytelling, and I think I just couldn't find it out. Do you think you already know what it is, or do you have to find it as you go along?
It can go either way. Some people that start stand up start it because something major happened to them, and they got fired or a divorce, or they got a bucket list thing going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes just that big event can kind of trigger the trajectory they're going to go with their comedy. But for most comics, I think you do have to kind of get out there and try different things. I was a big Steve Martin fan when I first started. I liked Dennis Miller too. I liked Andrew Dice Clay as well. So I could probably go back and find some of my old tapes and listen to them and hear a little bit of that in the joke writing and the delivery and all that. So those are like training wheels. You got to ride the bike a little bit, but you've never done it before. So those training wheels from using other people's style a little bit or whatever kind of keep you on the sidewalk long enough for you to realize, okay, I'm going to try it by myself. And, eventually you drop those other influences because you find out what works for you. And it can take comics, a lot of professionals say it takes them 7 years of being a full-time comedian before they find their comedic voice that they can really hone in on. You know, just to give an example, like a lot of people like Louis C.K., he's very authentic, kind of raw, but he's
Hmm.
very to the point. But
Hmm.
when he first started, he was a real goofy kind of guy. I mean, it took him a while to figure out what worked best for him. And it really wasn't until he had kids, I think. He had one of his jokes about his baby just being a deadbeat, not bringing any money into the house. And he was just talking really negative about a baby. And
Hmm.
he thought it was going to be kind of risky to say that, but people really could connect with that, you
Yeah.
know? And so he's like, oh, I can be a little bit darker and a little bit, more brash than maybe I thought I could. And that turned his whole career a different direction. So, it can take 7 years. It doesn't have to. Some people start with a better idea.
Yeah.
But, the key is really if you're in tune with what's connecting with the crowd and you're thoughtful about it, you can kind of identify it maybe a little bit earlier than the other people.
Okay, great. Would you say Steve Martin was one of your biggest influences?
He was one of my biggest inspirations. That's the way I look at it now. Like when I first started, I want to do a lot of crazy, wacky stuff like him, but there's only one Steve Martin. You know,
Yeah.
he was like the musical version of Emo Phillips, like just kind of bizarre, non-comedy comedy. But he was one of the guys that I wanted to be like, but quickly realized, oh, he's a genius. I'm not a genius. So maybe let me try Andrew Dice Clay for a few minutes. Not that Andrew Dice Clay doesn't have some kind of genius about him, but
Yeah, way to cover yourself on that one. That was a good cover.
I used
Okay.
to do it where I was, if Andrew Dice Clay had moved to New York City and do "You Might Be a Redneck" jokes as Andrew Dice Clay, and then Jeff Foxworthy doing Dice Clay type material.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was
Well.
stuff.
Okay, well, it's funny that you mentioned Andrew Dice Clay. We'll get back on the clean comedian thing there a little bit. What made you decide to be a clean comedian? Did you start out being someone who kind of, kept it clean, or did you kind of find that along the way?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I was fairly clean. I don't remember being vulgar at all. If I was any kind of edgy or anything, it was always kind of on the goofy side of it. And it just no, I grew up in a Christian environment, so I always felt like, I should honor God a little bit with what I'm doing. Although honestly, back in the early days, that first decade, I was probably too far away from that center,
Hmm.
and was just trying to make it all about me and find my way of doing comedy and all that. But a kind of combination of the audience really only laughing at the stuff that I delivered that was clean, clued me into it, and that made me more motivated to write more clean stuff. And then I also looked around. There was plenty of dirty comics already, and every club I went to, they wanted a clean act at least to open the show because they just don't have enough of them.
Hmm.
And so as a way to get more work, I thought, well, I'm just going to be clean. And sometimes when you label that on yourself, it can add the expectations, both good and bad, from audience members. If they see a clean comedy show, some people won't show up for it, and other people show up waiting for you to mess up so they can get their money back and say it wasn't clean.
Yeah.
But I thought by having those parameters on the sides, it kept my material straight down the middle where I wanted it to be.
Wow. Okay. Great. Do you still get nervous before a performance?
Occasionally, if for me, it's more if the situation, the staging, the lights, and the sound aren't set up right, then I know it's going to be a challenge, and I get a little nervous because I mean sometimes I can see. It's not as often anymore because I do a lot of troubleshooting in advance, but you can see when you walk into a room that it's going to be a challenge.
Hmm.
The ceilings are 80 feet high. They've got, poor microphones. They get the crowd seated far back. There's a
Yeah.
bar right next to the stage during the corporate event or whatever it is.
Right.
And so those make me a little nervous, and I think more distressed than nervous, just like, I'm going to have to be the best version of myself, almost like a ringmaster to rein this crowd in.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think those are good experiences. Anytime something looks hard and you go up against it, you get better. So if all my gigs were set up perfectly, I may not feel as challenged and may not develop as much.
Okay. I like what you had said, and I was listening to your podcast with Brian Bates and Johnny W. at the beginning of the year, and you were talking about basically before you go into an event, making sure everything is good to go. Make sure triple
Right.
checking things. Is that basically what you were talking about? Where that can throw you off if you get there and they go, "Oh, by the way, we didn't have sound equipment." Is that pretty much what can blow everything up?
Yeah, as much as you think people look at a contract and the details and even listen to the conversation you have with them about the lighting and the sound, sometimes you'll get there and they're like, well, it's a small room. We thought you could just talk louder. Like at least once a year, somebody says that, this room only seats 65. Maybe you could be, well, comedy isn't funny when you shout it at people. You if I'm doing a joke about my kids, and I'm shouting, it sounds like I'm shouting at my kids. It's like, the microphone is also it gives you nuance. You can pull away from it. You can get quiet. And without that, it just. I've had some great shows. Don't get me wrong, where there was no microphone, or sometimes the sound went out, the power went out.
Hmm.
Sometimes those are great because people have to lean in a little bit to hear what you're saying, and you have to slow down because you can't talk while they're still laughing.
Hmm.
So those are good once in a while, but it's not the best way every time.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I have there's two definite questions I wanted to ask you. The first one is, maybe it may be a simple answer, but are you born funny?
I don't know. I think that's one that's going to be debated for the history of time.
Right.
I've had people come through my class that aren't naturally funny, but they're great writers, or they develop into great writers, and then because of that, they're funny when they're on stage. So I think if your personality isn't funny, that's not a deal breaker. There's some comics that use that to their advantage,
Mm.
and their stage persona is kind of a down person. Like, I mean, Stephen Wright, you look at him, he's not a happy, goofy guy on stage,
True.
but his writing is brilliant.
Yeah.
So he's not a naturally funny person, but as a thinker, the way he writes, he is.
Yeah.
So
Great
your
point.
personality could be different, I think, but you can learn how to craft a joke for sure.
Okay. And my other one question I definitely wanted to ask you as well. How difficult is it to be a stand-up comedian on down days? Like when you've had when you've had a bad day, how difficult is it to go on stage and now to make people laugh? Or can that rehab you out of that bad mood?
It's tricky. I've had situations like I remember driving to a show, and on the way over there, I get a message from my brother that my mom had a heart attack. She's in the hospital. She made it out fine, but this is like 20 minutes before I pull up to the venue.
Oh wow.
And on top of that, it was a venue that wasn't set up right. So the whole time I'm distracted by the thoughts of my mom, and I can't wait to call and see how she's doing. And I've got to do the show, and the show's not set up right. But, that's why you're being paid, is to be able to work yourself through those things. Luckily for me, unfortunately, I haven't had a situation where, because of a family member or a situation, I've had to cancel a show and not show up. I've always been able to get through it. Just like, basketball players like Isaiah Thomas in the Celtics, I think it was his sister died in a car crash like right before a game. And
Yeah.
he's like, she would want me to play, and you got to work yourself through it. So you can distract yourself with the art. But sometimes if you don't watch out, also the other thing happens where the art's distracting you from real life, and you kind of lose touch with things that are important. That makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
some people spend so much time on the road, they can't switch back into being a father when they get home, or even a father when they're on the road, they lose touch with doing that. So,
Wow. Is that a
but
difficult act to balance, being a husband, father, when you're at home and then, you're out on the road? I'm sure you're out on the road so much. Are you out on the road more, or are you at home more?
I'm home more, but when I tell people I do 130 to 145 days out of town a year, that sounds like a lot, but it's not the majority of the time. But then there's a lot of times where I'm traveling back a half day here and there, so it can eat up some time. So when I'm gone, I try to check in as much as I can with the family. Occasionally, we would do like a Skype phone call or a FaceTime type thing if it's been especially a long trip. And I try not to schedule really long trips. I mean, for me, a long trip would be 4 or 5 days straight. When I was in comedy clubs, that would be a regular week, But now with kids, I hate being gone that long. So, but also when I pull in the driveway or land at the airport or whatever before I get home, if I'm dealing with anything that happened at the show or any business stuff, I check my emails before I pull in the driveway, before I open the garage door. So I've gotten the habit now of not even bringing my bags in. I just kind of walk in, and I'm hugging the kids and chilling out. When they go to bed, I'll unpack and all that stuff. Um, but it's not so much of a mindset shift when you come home. I think it's more when you leave to keep everything intact when you leave.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a great answer. Okay, so I have another question for you. In the stand-up community, I've always wondered this, and I'll ask you. And this may be a difficult question to answer. I don't know, but in the stand-up world, is it a dog eat dog kind of thing, or is there a real community to it, or is it kind of both kind of thing?
It's a little bit of both. Like, there is the competition side of it, and but I also think that the competition side of it is on your way up. It feels like there's a competition all the time. Once you figured out what you do, this only happened to me probably in the past 4 or 5 years. I'm not in competition with anybody else ever for a show. If a group doesn't pick me, I wasn't the right fit. It may have been between me and two other comics, and that's fine. But the competition for me is always to make sure that what I do is well represented on my website, in the way I communicate, in my YouTube videos, all of those things, so that when somebody comes across me as an option, they get a very clear picture of what I do.
Hmm.
And if I'm not the person for them, that's fine. You can't, even though my act is clean and you could be 6 or 96 and see my show and get some laughs out of it. You can't just try to please everybody and blend into every show because you'll lose the focus of what you really are at your core, you know?
Hmm.
So the competition's there, but there's also that camaraderie level where, and not to discredit when I say this, it might sound like I'm discrediting the military, but it's almost like a military thing where if you've done comedy for 10 years, you've been through some battles,
Yeah, no, it
and
makes sense.
you just like when you see another comic, even if you've never met that comic before or even heard of them, if you sit beside somebody in the airport and you're like, what do you do? Comedian. I'm a comedian. You instantly know about 60 of the same people. You've been to the same comedy clubs. You've been through some of the same challenges. And even if I don't even know what their comedy is like, I have to respect that person because I know the challenges it takes to do this full time.
Yeah, wow. So I have a question for you, Rik. Also, um, I was wondering what point did you go? You know what? Maybe I should try doing these speaking engagements. You know, like I guess like you had mentioned earlier, you do corporate events. When did that come along that you go, hey, I could do these as well and make some money on the side as well for that? What made you decide to do that?
Well, the the speaking where I'm funny a little bit, but more or less have a point throughout. You know, it's like 80-20 the other way, where I'm serious with some comedy woven in. That started when the big depression hit. Was it 2008 or nine?
Yeah.
When the economy crashed, I'd been booked to do comedy at, I think that fall when everything started falling apart in that October, November. The year after that, I'd been booked probably in 41 places on my calendar before the first day of the year even happened. I was already booked. And by the 10th of that year, about 20 of those had canceled because the company wasn't going to have an event because they couldn't afford it, or B, they weren't going to have a comedian because it would look like they were wasting money. So
Wow.
I started getting these cancellations, and I was like, whoa, this has never happened before. Then one guy said, I'm trying to think of his name right now, he was with the Mississippi Rural Water Association. So I was booked to go down there and do an hour of comedy. And he calls me up, he goes, Mr. Rik, we got a situation here. I said, what's the matter? He goes, well, our attendance is way down for one, but the biggest thing is if I write comedian on your check, they might fire me.
Oh no.
He said they're looking at every single nickel we're spending right now. He goes, if you could have a few points and not be funny for a little while, I can write you a check and put speaker on the memo. He said, can you do that? I said, buddy, I can be not funny all day long. So I said, what kind of points do you want me to get across? And I remember to this day, he goes, well, a lot of our guys, they don't manage their time very well, and they're not very good at setting goals. So if you could just speak on that and make it funny, that'd be a win for us. And I said, man, I don't know if I could pull that off. We had about 3 months for me to make this transition. He goes, well, if you do, you'd set a goal and you manage your time pretty well, and that's a success story right there. So give it a go. I said, well, let me think about it. And then I love the Andy Griffith show, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do a speech, I would love to. I do a little Barney Fife thing as well, so I'm like, I'd
Oh
love to be
yeah.
in it. And so I came up with this program called the Mayberry Method, where
Hmm.
it's different. Now I have, I think, 12 different soft skill topics I can talk about in the speech, but initially it was
Wow.
time management and goal setting, and I related different, situations in their company to episodes of the Andy Griffith show. And so when I did that, it gave me a fun element to it. It was already enjoyable, and people who love the Andy Griffith Show get an extra kick out of the program. And I could reference some episodes. I could pull some of my jokes from my comedy show in there if they fit the topic.
Hmm.
And then also, it taught me this. This is probably the biggest takeaway. I know I'm giving you a long answer, but
No, you're okay.
when so I had to do research to talk about time management. I had to do research to talk about goal setting. So what that made me do was rethink the way I manage my time and rethink the way I set goals. And as a comedian, my only goal every year was to still keep on doing it. I didn't have anything beyond that.
Hmm.
I wanted to make a little bit more money every year and get into some better clubs, but there was never any concrete goal setting. Well, that year that I started doing the Mayberry method, by the end of that year, I'd implemented all these things I'd started talking about, and my business went up 35% the very first year
Wow.
because I started having some kind of structure to my day. So that was great. Him asking me to do that, I remember at the very first one, after I got done, a lady came up and said, we'd like to book you for 4 of our events. And I was like, what? Because that rarely happens after a comedy show. We're like, we want to book you for 4 more corporate events today. and she's with the Department of Agriculture, and she set through my program. She's like, yeah, we could do this in Utah. We could do this in, she just listed off all these places. I'm like, let's do it. And so then I started thinking, well, there is something to this. I thought it was going to be a one-off thing where I just kind of saved my paycheck by doing this gig for this guy, but I'd put quite a bit of time into it. I'm like, let's do it again. And it got better and better. And, now it's one of my favorite programs to deliver, and it changes with the news that's happening. I put current events in there to keep it fresh. And there's lessons, everything from the United incident where they drag a guy off a plane,
Yeah.
to stuff that's going on in the news. So it's been an interesting thing, and I've got two other speeches on the side now that I do it. But comedy is always still 80% of my business, and the speeches are the other 20.
Wow. And I'll tell you what, your Barney 5 is second to none.
You want a little?
It is so, so good. What made you go, why don't I go out there as Barney?
Well, it was kind of a combination. Like when I was with that improv group way back in the early 90s, we had a couple of scenes where you needed celebrities in the scenes. And so I didn't have anything I could do. I did a bad version of Dana Carvey's George Bush, not gonna that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that got an okay laugh. But then one day I saw this hat. It was basically almost like a bus driver's hat, but I put it on sideways. I'm like, wow, how y'all doing? I started doing my Barney Fife thing. And they're like, dude, you got to do that in the show. And then I did it enough that it became part of my stand-up. I kind of worked out a piece of my stand-up where I do some Barney Fife. And I remember a guy from Wendy's, the burger chain, came out. He happened to see one of our shows, and he's like, man, we would love for you to dress up like Barney Fife and go to Dave Thomas's birthday party and surprise him because he's a huge Andy Griffith fan.
Really?
And I'm like, well, I don't have the uniform or anything. They're like, we'll help you get it together. We'll reimburse you for what you find. So I basically went in there with a cap gun and a plastic holster, and my hat turned on sideways. And he was the guy that told me to get a website because this was 96. And I must have talked to him for an hour at his birthday party. He just wanted to talk Mayberry the whole time. And as I'm headed out the door, he's like, young man, you need to get a website together and let people know you can do this because that was fantastic.
No kidding.
From a millionaire any day.
Wow. That's great. Okay, so I have a question then. What's more fun for you, doing the stand-up or doing the conventions and stuff, like the seminars or the speaking engagements?
I like it all equally.
Great
Stand-up.
answer. That's a great answer.
Stand-up is the least because I've done it for so long. Like I could get a phone call right now and be on a stage in 10 minutes and I'm good to go.
Right.
With a program like the Mayberry Method or some of the other stuff I do, it's a little advanced planning. I'm working in very specific stuff for that company into the program, so it's a little bit more work. I don't mind doing it, but when I'm up there behind the microphone, the hardest thing I guess for me was when I first started, how do you gauge you gave a good speech versus a good comedy show? Comedy show is easy. People laughed. They bought your CDs afterwards. They had a good time. A speech, there's body language. So if they're leaning in, they're taking notes. They're very, you can look in their eyes and you can see they're getting the point.
Yeah.
That's how you judge that. And the funny is just the medicine that helps the flavor that helps the medicine go down in those situations.
Okay.
But I love the challenges for all of them because I've learned stuff in the speaking world that has helped my stand-up business. I've learned stuff by doing stand-up that helps my speeches. I've learned stuff by teaching the class that helped me develop a motivational program. So it's all kind of fed off each other.
Okay. All right. Well, Rik, before I'm fixing to put you through the questions of torture and awesomeness. Are you ready for this?
Oh, this is going to be great.
Okay. All right. So, and by the way, this has been so fun, and I'm so thankful again that you took the time to do this. So thank you.
No problem at all. It's been fun.
Okay, great. Okay, so biggest starstruck moment.
When I saw the back of Don Knotts' head.
No kidding.
Yep,
Where was this at?
So I woke up, I was performing at Side Splitters Comedy Club in Tampa, Florida back in the 90s. And got up Saturday morning, I'm having my coffee, looking at the paper, and it said at Orlando's Universal Studios, Don Knotts is doing a book signing. And I'm like, oh, this would be perfect. And I looked at it, it was like an hour and a half away from when I first read about it. And I've got to drive from Tampa to Orlando, which is about an hour if everybody's getting out of your way.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm in, man. So I got in the car, raced over there. I got in, paid for parking, paid for the tickets to get in the Universal Studios, all that stuff. I'm like, where's Don Knotts doing a book signing? They're like, oh, it's down that way, but he might be done already. I'm like, no.
Oh, no.
So I run across, and I get to the place where he's doing a book signing, and there's people walking out, And I say, "Where's Don Knotts?" And they're like, "Oh, he's right there." And I see like a security guy behind him, and there he goes, and he closes the door and locks it.
Oh.
And I was like, "You got," like I was excited because I saw the back of his head. But
Oh.
like, I've been trying to do some Barney Fife to the security guy just to let him know that I'm a big fan. He's like, "Oh, trust me, everybody's got a Barney Fife impression." I mean, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. But what's funny to me is like some of my friends that I started off in comedy, seeing them blow up and be, like Dan Whitney, who's Larry the Cable Guy, is a good buddy of mine.
Yeah.
And just seeing him from when he didn't even have the character yet to seeing how far he's gone with it, that's been really cool.
Yeah, that's great. I seen your picture also recently on Facebook. That was a really cool picture.
Yeah, he was here at the Ryman and said, "Come on backstage, buddy." So it was cool.
That's awesome, Rik. Okay, so next question: SNL or In Living Color?
SNL.
Okay.
Because if In Living Color didn't have Jim Carrey, I probably wouldn't have tuned in.
There you go. I completely agree. Jim Carrey, huge comedic influence for me as well. Public toilet or outside? You got to go.
I'll wait a few more minutes for the public toilet if I need to.
Okay. All right. Do you sing in the shower?
Not well.
All right. Have you ever got hooked to a daytime soap opera? And if so, which one?
I have not, although I can tell you really quickly, my father-in-law used to work customs up in Cleveland, and he had shows that him and three middle-aged guys would sit around and watch day by day. And when he retired, he was still watching those in the afternoon.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I have something to tell you. It was funny because it was probably when I was 17, 18 or so after I graduated. I had got a job at Kroger's. And so my grandmother would watch all these soap operas during the daytime. And so I moved in with my grandmother after I graduated. And so she was watching all these soap operas, and I couldn't help it. I got hooked to The Young and the Restless. And it was so bad because I'd go into work the next day, and I was working with all these women, like middle-aged women, and they're talking about The Young and the Restless. And they're kind of messing up the storylines.
Right.
But I can't tell them. I mean, I cannot be the 18-year-old single guy who's like, no, you don't understand. Victor, what he's trying to do is I just could not do that. So that's one of my sad moments in my life that I've let that for the world to know now. So
Funny.
Okay, reality TV, yay or nay?
Nay.
Okay, song that you hate and a song that you love.
Song that I hate. Probably any Katy Perry song because it's just always too loud. The vocals are always mixed way too up in the front.
Right.
A song that I love. Here's one that probably people may not know, but "Industrial Disease" by Dire Straits is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Wow, I thought
So
I was a fan of Dire Straits, and I don't know that song.
Oh, "Industrial Disease" is one of the best.
Okay, duly noted. I will listen to that. Okay, have you ever took any hotel amenities like soap, shampoo, towels, or anything like that?
Well, soap shampoo you paid for, so if you need that Pantene Pro V and a travel size, go ahead and grab it. I will admit to doing this, staying at the Marriott and having breakfast at the Holiday Inn Express. It's happened a couple times.
Hey, could you tell the story, if you wouldn't mind, where you would keep hotel cards?
Sure. Yeah, so when I first started comedy, and I'm not proud of it, and it's kind of funny, but I don't think I would ever do it again.
I'm sorry to make you relive this. I'm sorry.
No, it's part of the journey, you know. Man, you're just broke as can be sometimes when you first start. And I remember the comedy clubs would either put you at a condo, which was I preferred that if the people you were staying with, the other comics were cool, or they put you at the cheapest hotel they could possibly get. We're talking $29.95 today in today's dollars,
Wow.
and to where I can do an hour on that. But listen, the you're so poor sometimes. You go and you wake up, you be hungry, and across the street there's the Holiday Inn. And so what I used to do is keep the key cards, the little plastic key cards from all the hotel chains, right up in my glove box. And if I was driving somewhere and I was hungry, I'd pull in the Days Inn or the Holiday Inn Express or the Hampton Inn or whatever, and I'd search out that key card and I'd just casually walk in the front door like I'm staying there and sit down and have me a breakfast. And which was all well and good till one time I was at the Drury Inn, and they have they make a custom omelet for you or something like that. And I was getting a little lippy with the lady making the omelet. I was like, that's not how you make it, and I need an orange juice. And she looked down, she says, "Sir, you're pushing it." I'm pushing it. She goes, "Yeah, we haven't used those plastic key cards here in about 3 years, so get your free breakfast and get out of here."
That is so great, man. I love that story. Okay, all right, moving on. Favorite Disney movie?
You can't beat Lion King. Uh,
Mine's Sword in the Stone. I love Sword in the Stone.
I need to watch that one.
Oh yeah, it's great. Okay, now I've got a tough one here. Are you ready for this? Andy Griffith or Seinfeld?
Andy Griffith, you know.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
That's my buddy Andy Griffith right there. I can't turn my coat on him.
Thank
He's
you.
my man that paid me.
Thank you so much, Barney. That was awesome. All right, best musical concert that you've ever seen.
Well, stuff that happens when you're a teenager or a young man leaves a big impression. So, U2's Joshua Tree concert when they were on that tour. And I'm happy to say on July 1st, me and my wife will be flying up to Cleveland to see him at Brown Stadium doing the Joshua Tree all over again.
Oh, that is so awesome. Oh, that is great. Okay, which comedian has made you laugh harder than anybody when you see them perform?
Oh, man. Let me think here for a second.
No problem. You can throw a few out there if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, there's guys that always make me laugh. One of my favorites is Jake Johansson.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He did Letterman 45 times, but people still don't know who he is sometimes.
Yeah.
Brian Regan, of course, every time I see him, he's got something really funny, goofy, physical thing going on with his material. But he's such a good joke writer too. Like one of my favorite things on his last concert special, he talked about infinity pools. Where it looks
Okay.
like the edge of the pool goes on forever and ever.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, some of these guys get an infinity pool, so just stop it. My friend's like, check out this infinity pool. I'm like, yeah, it goes right into your chain link fence in your neighbor's yard. So those guys are always funny. I'm trying to think of who else. Cable Guy, I just saw him. He still has some really funny misdirection stuff that gets me. There's a lot of road
Oh
comics
yeah.
I've never heard of, but those guys get me.
Okay, great. All right, Wedgie, pull it out or let it ride.
Oh man, I think you got to look for a place where nobody's watching and you pull it back out.
There you go. That's the appropriate answer. You just don't do it out in the middle of the mall hallway there.
You
just...
can't be doing that by Charlie's while they're having.
Okay, which comedian, alive or dead, that did you want to see, or have you not seen yet that you want to see?
Oh, you know what? Like I really wanted to go see Don Rickles, and my wife and I were talking about it. She's never been to Las Vegas. I thought this will be great. We'll go out and catch him. He's not, he wasn't in his prime for probably the past 10 years, but it'd still be somebody to see. And not going to see him is a regret.
Okay, good answer. Which state has the best crowds to perform in front of?
Indiana or Michigan?
Oh, okay, good. All right, do you know how to change oil in your car?
I do. I prefer not to, but I do know.
Okay, all right. Dukes of Hazzard or Chips?
Oh, now you've got me. Oh,
Yes.
that's a tough one. I'm going to go with Dukes of Hazzard, but it's just by like 1 decimal point. Like it's very small. Because I grew up watching those Chips shows too.
Yeah.
But Boss Hogg and Roscoe Pete Coltrane, get him, Flash, go, kitty boy, go, get Flash, go,
You can't beat Dukes of Hazzard. I know, and it's so close because you gotta love Ponch and John. I mean, Poncherello, but man, even though Dukes of Hazzard had the Coy and Vance years, it's still Bo and Luke, man, all the
Can I
way.
tell you a quick Eric Estrada story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm in the Denver Convention Center for the International Police Chiefs Association Conference and Convention. I'm dressed up as Barney Fife working a 9/11 booth on one level.
Okay.
And I'm going up the escalator with my credentials to get into that spot. Eric Estrada was pitching some booth, and he was coming down the escalator on the other side. It's like one of those 4-story escalators. Like, it's just huge.
Yeah.
And I see him, and he sees me at the same time, and I point at him, and he points at me. And I make a little motion like, let's get a picture. And he's like, yes. And so I come down the escalator. He goes back up the other one trying to catch me at the top, and we see again. We give each other one of these, I guess it's not going to work out kind of deals.
Oh, man. That's
Been
great.
too much fun.
Okay, Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck?
Bugs.
Okay. Has a movie ever made you cry, and which one?
E.T. when I was a young man, when they put him in a garbage bag, I was over, man.
Okay. Stallone, Van Damme, or Schwarzenegger?
I'm not big into any of those guys, but I have to go with Sylvester Stallone.
Okay, all right. Someone has a booger. Do you tell them?
Only if it's getting close to me.
Okay. Pants or shorts?
Shorts until December.
Okay. Wow, that's a good answer. Do you sing in the car?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Best music album of all time?
Oh, it's either going to be Quadrophenia from The Who. Um, I'm going to go with that one.
Okay. All right. Best comedy album?
Oh man, that's a little tricky.
Okay, you can give me two or three if you want. It's fine.
All right, the White Album by Dennis Miller that was
Okay.
recorded in Tempe, Arizona at the Improv. That's one of my favorites, top to bottom. And Let's Get Small, Steve Martin.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, first movie star crush.
Oh man, E.T. And when they put him in the garbage bag, it just crushed me.
Oh, you turned it on me. Perfect. Okay, two more. Two more.
Okay.
This one right here, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask. Have you ever passed gas on stage?
Oh yeah. Not
Oh,
not very often, but I'm sure there's been a case where it's happened.
yeah, okay. And this one's not so bad. This is a final question here for you. Two proudest moments of your life.
Oh man. Um, I'd have to say when both my kids were born because my wife was a trooper and I went out in the parking lot of the hospital and threw up both times.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so I was proud of her. I wasn't too proud of me, but oh, it was such extreme. The first one, I don't know, don't want to get into it, but I was so proud of her for doing that, and pretty ashamed that I was out in the parking lot just hurling. When my first son was born, I had eaten Taco Bell for lunch, and I mean that was a bad.
Oh, no, enough said.
She delivered about 6 minutes before I delivered a half-pound chalupa into the back of a Toyota Camry.
Isn't it funny? Like, I think the only two restaurants that you need to say, I had this and then I got sick was either Taco Bell or Crystal's. Those are the only two where you go, oh, okay, you get a pass. Those are the
And
only two.
I would throw White Castle in there as well.
White Castle, that's true. Very, very true. Okay, Rik, first off, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. So appreciative of it. Guys, I want you also to know, if you want to find Rik, go to RikRoberts.com. Check out his official website. You can also go to schooloflaughs.com, correct, Rik, on the podcast and just learning about the classes?
Yeah, schooloflaughs.com and the Rik Roberts. As long as you spell it R-I-K for Rik, you'll find me in there.
That's right.
If you search me on Google, search Rik Roberts comedian because there's a Rik Roberts wrestler that spells it the same way. And you can put us side by side and figure out which one I am.
Okay, duly noted. Also, you can check him out. Check out, obviously Rik Roberts, R-I-K, on YouTube, Facebook, his fan page, and as well as Twitter. You can check out his School of Laughs podcast on iTunes as well. Correct, Rik?
iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for adding those last two in there. Man, you're a great storyteller. You're a great comedian. I think you're a great person as well, man. And just again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, I can't wait. Let me know when you put it out, and I'll share it with my friends so they can find you as well, Anthony. It's been a real fun time. Sorry it took a while to get it to happen, but I'm glad it did.
No apology necessary, buddy. Anyways, take care, man, and good luck in everything still.
Hey, thank you.
This is the exit music for the My Peeps show. This is the exit music for the My Peeps show. This is the part where they put all the boring stuff, like who produced it, wrote it and such. This is the exit music for the My Peeps show. This is the exit music. Why are you even still here looking at this stuff? For the My Peeps show.